Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have you here today. It's me, Julie Murad, founder of the Gabriel Foundation, 30 years ago now. And we're so excited to be able to have this series of webinars, thanks to our great team of Kyra and Anna and Wendy for working and be able to present this. We have a wonderful lineup of webinars coming up in 2025. We're really excited to share. And we are so looking forward to your questions, the information that we have to share with you, and a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to defer to Kyra for a moment.
Yes, so just a couple of things. We are recording, so everyone will be able to view this afterwards. We'll be uploading that to YouTube so everyone can watch. We are going to be using the chat a few times during the webinar. Just for getting some feedback and for people to list some observations that they're seeing. So we'll be using the chat for that. But if you have any questions that are coming up during the webinar, we ask that you put those in the Q&A portion of the webinar. So chat will just be for discussion, but those questions are going to go in the Q&A. That way we can reference all of those and see all of those at the end of the presentation when we do the Q&A portion. So just make sure that you're putting those questions there so we can see them.
Thanks, everyone. And if you have questions as we go along, just be sure and ask us. You can post, as Kyra just mentioned. We've all thought so much lately about enrichment because we talk about the psychosocial needs of parents that we love. And really, one of the terrific advantages of working every day with parents is that we learn from our very best teachers, and that is the parents themselves. And I like to think that every day they teach us something new to them, and everybody's desire to make our birds' lives as wonderful as possible. We're really excited about enrichment because it is so important. It covers so many aspects of a parent's life and can really enrich our interaction with our birds by being creative, enthusiastic, having fun, and enjoying sort of the fruits of our labor. So with that, we've got a full agenda today. We'll be discussing this for about an hour about an hour and 15 minutes to hour and a half. And then we'll be opening up the webinar for specific Q's and A's or discussion. And I would love to turn this over right now to Kyra and to Anna, and they're going to take the steering wheel and lead us through the next few hours.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so before we get into all of the fun parts of enrichment and safety considerations and the nitty-gritty that we're really going to dig into together today, we wanted to start out by defining enrichment so that we're all on the same page of what we are talking about. So there's my little assistant who has skateboarded in to help with this portion. So the way that we define enrichment is that for our animals that we're caring for, we're providing that animal with proper stimuli to maximize their psychological and physical well-being. So we'll look a lot more at what that means as we go. But in a nutshell, as caregivers, we want to keep our animals engaged with their environments and with ourselves or with flock members, keep them entertained throughout the day, particularly for those of us who work during the day and can't spend all day with them. And just keep their beaks busy without overwhelming them. For any of us who have more sensitive birds in our lives, we can definitely relate to that piece of not going over the top for that individual. But some birds might like a ton of enrichment. So we'll have lots of different ideas and options for you to try out today. Okay, next. And of course, we want to understand why enrichment is important. It's hard to get motivated to put the work into creating enrichment opportunities for our animals if we're not sure what the point of all of it is. So, of course, we want to fight birdie boredom. So we already kind of touched on that in the definition of enrichment that we shared. So we want our birds to have a lot to engage with throughout the day, whether we are there with them or not. We, of course, adding variety to our enrichment will help to just give a more holistic enrichment plan to our birds and keep our birds happy, mentally healthy, and stimulated. And there are also physical benefits in addition to all of those psychological benefits. So if we think about, of course, exercise, obesity is a big concern when caring for birds and keeping them happy and healthy. So the more exercise that they're getting from moving around their cage and manipulating objects, or even if we're working on training goals that help them to exercise, these are all ways that our birds can stay fit. There's also the physical aspect of keeping their beaks in good shape. Of course, if they're chewing on appropriately hard materials for their size, that will help to just kind of naturally grind down that beak to stay in a nice, wonderful shape. And of course, as we're manipulating these objects potentially with their feet, be it a foot toy or grabbing a part of a hanging toy or other piece of enrichment, that can add dexterity throughout their lifetime as they're using their feet in ways that aren't just sitting on a perch or holding their food items. So there are many physical benefits as well to providing enrichment. And finally, we want to have an enjoyable time living with our birds, of course, and there are a lot of behavioral challenges that can come along with having parrots in our lives. So providing adequate enrichment opportunities can really help to minimize problem behaviors such as screaming behaviors if they have nothing else to do, even aggression from being frustrated if they're like pent up and stuck in a cage that they don't have much to do in. But yes, and a lot of the other ways that we can enrich our birds' lives through behavior and training can actually work on problem behaviors as well. So, okay, next slide. As we talk about enrichment, there are a lot of different ways we can approach that topic. So we've outlined a couple different categories of enrichment here. And as I go through these different categories, you'll notice it is completely natural to connect these different categories. It is actually pretty much impossible to talk about just physical enrichment without bringing in some kind of sensory aspect, as that is a type of sensory enrichment. So as we go, everything is connected, and that is a really great way to approach seeing if there are areas of your bird's life that could be more fleshed out. Like if your bird has tons of physical enrichment, but not much cognitive enrichment, things like that. So, of course, first and foremost, one of the more obvious categories of enrichment that comes to mind is that physical enrichment. So this is something that your bird is going to physically engage with, like toys. But there are a lot of different kinds of enrichment aside from physical objects that they're interacting with. So as I mentioned, physical enrichment is a type of sensory enrichment. So we can think of our birds' different senses and try to engage them in other ways. So of course, visual enrichment. So having lots of color and engaging aspects for them to look at. We can also have auditory enrichment, like music or having bird TV or cartoons on while we're gone. And then, of course, we can do sense of smell is kind of a funky one. You can provide them with more aromatic food items is kind of a fun way to do that. I like offering star anise occasionally to my birds, which has a really nice smell. And then, of course, taste, which connects very easily to food enrichment, which we can do a lot with different foraging opportunities, kind of larger vegetable or fruit food items that they can manipulate and play with. So that's a really fun category as well. Social enrichment can mean a lot of different things as well. So we have this cute picture of these two lovebirds snuggling and preening each other. So if your birds get along and you have multiple birds in the home, that are friends or even share a cage, having that social enrichment within a larger flock is wonderful. But that can also mean your social interactions with your bird. So that could be just through your day-to-day routine, or if you have training sessions with your bird, that is usually a very enriching part of their day. And those special ways that we go out of our way to engage are really just enriching our birds' lives through that routine we've built with them. Another aspect we can think about is environmental enrichment. So we have a cute picture of Pearl sitting in one of our outdoor enclosures. So of course, going outside in a safe way, be that in a safe enclosure, or if they are harness trained or backpack trained, that can be a really enriching way for our birds to engage with a very complex environment, being in the great outdoors. But we can also think about environmental enrichment as how does our bird's entire environment, even indoors, come together to create an enriching kind of day and experience for them. So looking at it really holistically, what are all the different stimuli in this environment? And then finally, cognitive enrichment. We've already touched on training sessions with our birds being a very enriching part of their lives. So this little buddy here is target training, which is one way to train. But even different ways to engage with your bird's mind, like puzzle feeders or really challenging foraging opportunities, things that make their cogs turn, where they're not just sitting there chewing on something. We could really engage their whole mind as we're coming up with different enrichment ideas. Okay.
So, one of the really important things to consider when we are looking at enrichment is our birds' behaviors in the wild. And we have to remember that when we're working with birds, we are working with animals that are maybe 1, 2, 3 generations removed from their wild counterparts. But when we're working with cats and dogs, these are animals that have been selectively bred over thousands of years, and they are very, very used to living with people. They are domesticated animals. And our birds are really wild animals that are living in captivity. And so one of the things that we need to consider when we are creating our enrichment is we want our birds to be able to exhibit natural behaviors that they exhibit in the wild. So one thing that we like to do is look at these behaviors in the wild to help us inform our understanding of enrichment, and then choose things that are going to promote some of those behaviors in our birds. So what I want everyone to do in the chat is just type out some ideas of behaviors that you might expect to see in the wild from your birds. And we'll take a minute so everyone can do that.
Hi, Carol.
Then we see some preening, there's regurgitation, flying. Whoa, everyone's typing so fast. Curiosity, screaming. Let's see, stretching, playing and preening with their friends and mates, allopreening, foraging, calling, climbing, having to crack open nuts and tear apart food. I love that one. Bathing, that's a great one. Balancing, I love that one. Awesome. These are all really good examples and ideas. Let's see, chewing, climbing, beak filing. Awesome. Love these. Some of the things that I had thought of were foraging for food, chewing on different materials like wood, shredding bark, leaves, other soft materials, holding things with their feet, digging, burrowing, the flying and vocalizing, and of course, interacting with their flock mates. But yeah, all of these are really great ideas. And it just goes to show how many different things our birds are doing when they're in their natural environments. What we're going to look at next, we were working with an adopter who was adopting one of our boy cockatoos, and we found that those visits were most successful when the adopters were sitting on the ground with their bird and they were interacting with the bird on the ground. So here we are going to watch a video, and these show slender-billed cockatoos in the wild. They're a very similarly related species. And so we're going to pause in a few areas, and I just want everyone to kind of note in the chat some of the behaviors that they are seeing with these birds. So we'll go ahead and take a look at this. Anna, will you just let me know and make sure that the audio is playing correctly?
No audio.
No audio. Oh no. All right, let's try this.
The corellas are often called blue-eyed cockatoos because they have a bluish periorbital eye ring. The feathers are mostly white, but then over the face and throat they can have variable amounts of pink depending on the species. This video has been filmed on the east coast and northern parts of Australia, so the emphasis will be on the little corella and the long-billed corella. On the western side of Australia there is also the western corella that has a bill length in between the little corella and the long-billed corella. The little corella only has a small amount of pink over the face, and often they were called the blood-stained corella.
Alrighty, so we're pausing here, and everyone can just put some ideas that they saw in our video of just some of what our birds were doing. Yeah, preening is an awesome one. We see these guys preening right now. Feeding, socializing. Yep, the walking on the ground, that was the big one that we saw in this video, that we used to inform our interactions with our adopter that we were working with. Yep, ground foraging, finding things in the grass. Yeah, exactly. So let's see, we're going to jump ahead to this part, and we're looking at some different feeding habits.
Habits of the corella. Here are little corellas feeding on grass seed. Now, they will come to areas where there is dirt, and sometimes their feeding is more playful than actually needing food. They will pick up pieces of bark and any other litter and chew on it to see what it's like. Here, they are mainly after pandanus seed, as it was an area close to water, and pandanus seed came out onto the mudflats. The second most common form of feeding for the corella is roots of grass seeds and tubers of various plants. Digging into the dirt like this causes the bill to shorten, but the bill seems to regenerate quickly. They also like feeding in the canopy of trees. In this video you can see them on fruiting seeds of acacia and cypress pine nuts. Both of these trees grow in semi-arid areas, and so this bird, the little corella, has adapted to semi-arid areas.
All right, we can take another pause and just make some notes of some of the different things we were seeing there with their feeding habits.
One
Playing
way,
with bark. Oh, go ahead, Julie.
I was going to say one way that we can create sort of a ground foraging environment in captivity for our birds is by getting a large, perhaps a terracotta saucer or a large plastic saucer. Depending on the size of your bird, they can be up to 36 inches in diameter, and get some bird-safe rocks. Most volcanic rock is safe, some river rock is safe, and all different sizes and pieces of things. Put them in that tray, and you can actually take nut pieces, and we'll get to about pine cones, but you can take nuts and hide them in the tray with the rocks and put them down on the bottom of your bird's enclosure, whether it's inside or whether it's outside, and create sort of a false foraging area, but to the bird, picking up and moving those rocks or moving twigs to find all those delicious pieces is an absolutely, absolutely fun way to watch your bird get excited and curious.
Awesome. And so some of the things that even Julie just mentioned here, we can see that those birds are foraging on the ground for seeds. They're picking up different grasses, leaves, barks. They're manipulating things with their feet. I love that the narrator mentions here that their beaks are getting worn down while they're digging through the mud, which is one of the things that we had discussed with Anna of why it's so important for us to be providing our birds with enrichment. It helps maintain their dexterity, those beaks. Let's see, I also loved when he mentioned that feeding is more playful than actually needing food source. And yeah, we can see that our birds are interacting with other birds, they're vocalizing, they're doing all sorts of different things. And so when we're watching this video, we're seeing that these birds are engaging in all 6 of the different enrichment categories that we defined with Anna. There's the physical aspect where they're flying, they're digging, they're picking things up. Social, they are interacting with flock members. Sensory, they are smelling and touching and feeling different things. Cognitive, they have different places that they know in their environment have specific resources. Food, they're of course digging and foraging. And environmental, they are in the wild, they're in a forest, there are different mud flats, and they're interacting with different trees and plants and flowers and other animals. And so we can see that these birds are surrounded by different stimuli at
The coral
all
vertical at the
times.
front, but does not fan.
We are going to pause that. Sorry, everyone. So what does this mean for our enrichment? In the wild, our birds are making thousands of choices every single day. They are surviving. And so when they're making these decisions, they're problem solving, they're making different choices, and their lives are just very full in that way. But when our birds are living in a captive environment, they can lose a lot of the opportunity for making choices. So then what are we doing? We are trying to craft an environment in which our birds can make choices and they can problem solve. We can do that by trying to combine as many categories of enrichment as possible. And in doing so, we are making the enrichment interesting and engaging. And one thing that's really important to keep in mind is if your bird is not interacting with a toy, or engaging with something, then it's not actually enriching them. We want the things that our birds are engaging with and interacting with to enrich them. They are not just cage decoration to make their living spaces prettier. So if we want to take the making our environments more natural very literally, one thing that we can look at is browse. Browse is something that's utilized very often in the zoological world where they're taking plant materials and things that our animals might encounter in the wild and adding those into their captive environments. So for our birds, this can look like different branches with lush foliage on them. This can be parrot-safe flowers that they're engaging with. Some things that we use very regularly are pine cones. And those are really awesome because they provide a foraging opportunity. They can dig into those and get the pine nuts. We love using edible flowers in our aviaries and outdoor spaces so our birds can pull those and they're interacting with the petals and the leaves. They're also edible, so it's overall just a really stimulating activity for our birds. One thing to consider when you're utilizing browse with your animals is making sure that you're not using anything that could have come in contact with any chemicals or pesticides. And this slide has really good information about cleaning and disinfecting that browse. This is very information heavy, so I would recommend referencing this back when you are cleaning those brows or taking a picture or a screenshot of this. But basically, we're cleaning these items with water, dish soap, or vinegar, and then allowing them to dry either in an oven or out in the sun, just to make sure that those are clean. They don't have any dirt, saps, things like that on them. So I would definitely reference this if you were thinking about using any brows with your birds. So when we're thinking of enrichment, one of the first things that usually comes to mind for us is toys. So through our next few slides, we're going to be looking at some really awesome toy examples and kind of dissecting them and looking at what makes them awesome enrichment. I will say all of these next examples were made by our very own Cherish Rosenfeld. She's incredibly talented when it comes to making these really intricate and awesome toys. So all of these next pictures are going to be examples that she provided us. So looking at these first ones, these are super creative and very colorful, but in the chat, just note a couple other things that you think makes them good enrichment. Materials, awesome. We've got different textures, variable materials, diversity of activity, shredding opportunities, varied colors, good for chewing, complexity, love that. Awesome. Yeah, and these were all different things that I had also noted about these toys. So they are colorful, they have a variety of materials, a variety of textures. I really love that these toys are layered because it is encouraging our birds to really dig through the different parts of the toy and explore the different layers and areas of the toy. Let's see, I would also say that this is encouraging some of those natural behaviors. So shredding of the materials, pulling the materials, chewing, they can hold different parts with their feet. This toy, it's a little hard to tell from the picture, but is crafted on a seagrass mat. And so this is a flat design, which allows you to hang this in different areas of your cages, which is then encouraging our birds to explore different areas of the cage and move around a little bit more. So encouraging some exercise. I often see when we use this type of toy with our smaller birds that they climb on the toy and they dangle off of the toy. So I really love that these can promote some exercise. And then let's see, I also love using these on top of a cage, kind of in that flat position as well. So offering some of that foraging opportunity, you can stick some little nuts in here. And again, a really good exercise there for the birds. In our next slide, these are kind of spooky Halloween themed toys. So the first one here on the left is an awesome little foraging box. We can see that there is a huge variety of toy parts, textures. I can see that there is a little nut wrapped in here and hidden for our birds to find. Up here, you can also see a cinnamon stick. So we're combining some of those food and sensory elements. And I really love doing foraging boxes because it is so easy to put just a whole big variety of materials into a container. This one has been assembled very nicely and it's very, very beautiful. But generally you can just put different things in a box and it's usually a pretty easy and speedy thing for us to do. And it provides our birds with so many different things to engage with. Let's see, on the right here, we have a very paper-focused toy. This is a used book. You can see it's kind of been rolled into like a circle, and we do that by folding the pages in on themselves, and then it kind of forms like a book donut. And so these are really awesome for birds that love to shred. And of course, it has all of this wonderful crinkle paper on top. They're really dense toys, and so it's good for small birds. It's good for medium birds. It's good for larger birds because they really have to work at some of those pages to really shred some of these inner layers of the paper. And one thing that I love about these toys is that sometimes it can be difficult to think of new ideas when we're coming up with enrichment. But one really easy way that we can provide our birds with variety and change is by using seasonal parts. These ones are obviously like Halloween kind of spooky materials, but you can check different stores like Walmart, Home Goods, the dollar store, different craft stores when we have upcoming holidays. And a lot of the times they have some really awesome seasonal paperwares. And that's just a really easy way to provide your birds with some variety in their enrichment. And on our next slide here, we have Addison, who is a TGF alumni, using the toy that we just looked at. And you can see that he's holding a little part of it with his foot. A lot of the birds will like to kind of sit on top of these or climb on these. So really love this picture just because it shows our birds interacting with this awesome enrichment. Our next slide, I included this one because it is one of my favorite pictures. This is another toy that Cherish had made. Super easy. It has these like little planter gardening cups, and they just create this little cavity, and she has some bird safe popcorn in here. And I love it just because it's like instant gratification of, I'm not sure if this is Caroline or Margot. But you can see that she's digging through this little cup and is immediately rewarded with some awesome popcorn falling here on her face. And this is also one of the birds that we looked at in our video of the slender-billed corellas. And yeah, she's using that slender little beak of hers to get some popcorn from this cup, and I just think it is so funny. Our next slide, we're talking about foot toys. And incorporating foot toys into our enrichment is so great for a couple of different reasons. The first and most obvious is that we are encouraging our birds to use their feet. Exercising their feet is so great for maintaining their dexterity. Birds are zygodactyl, so they have the two toes in the front, the two toes in the back, and their feet are designed that way so that they can hold on to things. So we really want to make sure that they are able to use their zygodactyl little toes and utilize some of those really important muscle groups there. I also love foot toys because they can be utilized in so many different ways. We can put them in different parts of their cages, which is again encouraging them to move around their cage and utilize different areas of their cages. I really like, you can see in the pictures here, they are on the grate, so they're moving down onto the bottom of their cages, something that we see a lot with the cockatoos. And so going back to some of those natural behaviors where we saw all the birds foraging onto the ground, we can encourage that by putting some of their toys on the ground here. I also really like using these on top of a cage where you have a play stand or like a flat topped cage. That can encourage them to climb out of the cage and move around there. I like to sit with my birds on the couch, or if I have them in the kitchen with me on a countertop. It can be a little boring if they're just sitting there with you, but we can kind of enhance that experience by providing them with some foot toys to interact with. I will give some of my larger birds a Kong toy, and I will put a nut inside, and so they're holding it and trying to get the nut while we're watching TV. And it's just a really easy way to make that a more enriching experience. One thing I also really like to do is incorporate foot toys into larger toys and different foraging activities to make them more complex. I might have a foraging box and then have smaller things inside of that foraging box that my bird then has to work through to get the actual nut that they're looking for. So there's so many different ways that you can utilize these foot toys. They don't just have to be sitting in one place on your cage. And you can just get really creative with it, which I love. This last slide is just showing a few more examples. This top row has some really cute, like Christmas winter themed toys. My favorite one here is the third toy that has all of those different puzzle pieces on it. I love the puzzle pieces because they're made out of cardboard, so they're a little bit harder. But they have just like a really interesting shape and really interesting texture to them. And you can see that this toy is very like dense looking. And so our birds have to kind of work through all of those different parts. But these are all really awesome examples, and some of our cute little cockatoos down here playing with some of those toys that Cherish had made us. Really awesome. And these are all just really cool, creative, different toys. So I recommend, if you'd seen any toys from here that you really liked, you can try to recreate it on your own. And even if it's not exact or as beautiful as Cherish's toys, she has some really awesome ideas here.
And I'd like to respond while we're on this page about the question in the chat about lead and other toxic substances are a worry when using tissue paper or craft items. Can you provide some sources for these type of products that are guaranteed non-toxic and bird safe? We'll get into this as we move further along, but one of the caveats that I'd like to introduce here is that your bird is a study of one. So your bird hopefully will demonstrate by its behaviors the kinds of materials that it's interested in. And when you're introducing a new material, the onus of responsibility to make sure that our bird is playing appropriately with that particular form of enrichment. If you see a bird biting off pieces of fabric or material or fleece, that could be a really good indicator that that's not a material you want to provide. But when it comes to papers, most all paperback books, phone books are printed with soy-based inks now. And if you're concerned about that, then we highly recommend culinary paper. You can use parchment paper. You can use rolls of craft paper, which you can buy from Uline or Home Depot. You can use rolls of white butcher paper. It's shiny on one side, but it is not waxed and is dull on the other side. And you can even use sheets of 11 by 17 or 8.5 by 11. There are a lot of products that utilize cardboard, and we'll get into that. And you've seen some wonderful kinds of in all of our pictures, but take a look and just make a mental note of how your bird interacts with those different materials. And that's going to be your number one clue about how to keep your bird safe.
Awesome. And we'll be talking a lot more in depth about safety things to consider. So if you have any other like very specific questions about safety related things, make sure that you put those in the Q&A, just so we can make sure to answer those at the end during our discussion. Wonderful. So we looked at a lot of really great examples just now. Those were all really creative, really beautiful, really intricate toys. But here at TGF, when we are making toys for our workshops or just day to day, we are making toys that are fun and we're making toys that are engaging, but we're also making them in bulk for over 200 birds. So they're slightly less beautiful than the toys that Cherish makes and maybe a little bit more simple. But that is the beauty of it. If you are dipping your toes into making your own enrichment, the anatomy of a TGF toy is something that's really, really simple to recreate. We've got our three main parts. We have the spine, And then we have all of our fun parts, the appendages. I have to click through all of these that I added. There we go. And then we have some sort of hanger to hang our toy up. And so breaking this down a little bit more, for our chains, we use a lot of stainless steel chain, stainless steel skewers, or rope. Stainless steel chain is always going to be my preference for chain. You can find this easily at most hardware stores or home improvement stores, and they can cut it for you at whatever length you request. You need to make sure that you are using a chain that is an appropriate size for your bird. So we have some really strong cockatoos here, really strong macaws that can definitely snap a 2 millimeter stainless steel chain. And so then we might need to upgrade to that 3 millimeter chain. We also are wanting to make sure that we're using a welded link chain. There are different chains out there. Some of them will have small gaps kind of between these little chain links here, but the welded chain are going to be welded completely shut. And so we're not at as much of a risk of getting those little nails or beaks stuck in these. Moving on, we have our stainless steel skewers. These are a really great option for those birds that can snap chains or maybe have a tendency to drop their toys from a quick link here. I also really love these because they are so easy to refill. It is so easy to just slide those toy parts onto there. They are a little bit more of an investment, and so something like if you're just learning how to make toys, you might opt for one of these other options instead. But if you were like an avid toy maker, refilling your toys all the time, then I really do love these skewers here. And then down here we have sisal rope. This is a really good, affordable option and something that we really use for like our toy making workshops, just because you can buy it in bulk, you can make a ton of toys out of this. And so if you're someone that was maybe looking to make bulk toys for your local rescue, this could be a really good option here. Some of the downsides of using sisal rope is that it's not as reusable as some of these stainless steel options. It would probably only last for about 1 to 2 uses. And because it's not as durable, this might not be the best option if you have a bird that can chew through the toy. So if you have a bird that can snap the chains and chew through the chains, they're probably going to be able to chew through your sisal here as well. We see that where the birds will chew through the middle of the toy and then half of the toy drops down to the cage. This is also going to be something that's a little bit more difficult to clean and disinfect. But again, this is a really good, affordable option, especially if you're making toys in bulk or doing like a toy event where you're making a bunch of toys for a flock environment. Moving on, these are just some examples of some of the awesome toy parts that you can use. This, of course, is not going to be a comprehensive list because there are so many different things out there that you could utilize. But just some of our categories here, different bird safe plastics. We use a lot of flip-flop foam, pool noodle foam. We utilize some acrylics and hard plastics. And then rubbers like Kong toys, those Kongs that you can put like peanut butter in, are also safe for birds. Here you're just staying away from things like styrofoam that can break into those small balls and small parts. Those are not going to be safe for use, but these generally hold their shape a little bit better and don't break apart into those small bits that could be ingested. We use fleece a lot as one of our bird safe fabrics to make like little cozies and little smuggles. Bird safe metals, we're using things like stainless steel. You can also use nickel plated metals, aluminum, wrought iron, but most of the toys that you encounter are going to be stainless steel. Cardboard, there are, if you are an avid Amazon shopper, you can use whole boxes, you can use them cut up. Different materials like egg carton and those drink holders that you can get from Starbucks have that more like porous kind of cardboard that you can utilize. Corrugated cardboard and packing cardboards are really awesome because they have really interesting texture to them. And then, of course, things that you use every day, so toilet paper, paper towel rolls. These are really good for foraging opportunities that I found. Let's see, other paper products, paper plates, treat boxes, different ice cream cups, making sure that these are not coated in any kind of wax or like Teflon coating. Sometimes they'll have those. And then papers, making sure that they're just like plain papers dyed with soy inks there. And then, of course, all of our natural parts. There are so many different ones here. We use a lot of Sola here, Loofah, Palm, but there are so many great websites that we'll be going over that offer some of these natural parts in kind of bulk. And so these are really awesome to incorporate into your toys if you're interested in using more natural materials. And I know we kind of touched on this a little bit with Julie, but as a reminder, these things are generally safe for our birds to interact with, but anything can have the potential to be unsafe if our birds are not interacting appropriately with them. And so we'll touch much more in depth on safety in just a little bit here. Here, wood. We use so much wood with our birds, different types of wood. I will not read this entire list of woods to you, but here are just some of the ones that you might consider. Here at TGF, we use a lot of the white pine and balsa for our smaller kiddos, but this is also a really good way to start incorporating some of that browse. If you have any of these trees or these materials in your yard, or if you have fallen branches, things like that, this could be really awesome for your birds to engage with. At my house and even here on the property, we've planted a lot of lilac bushes. We're getting into lilac season here, and so in the springtime, I'll snap off some lilac branches and put those in my cages. And that way our birds can interact with the flowers and the leaves and the wood there. And let's see, it looks like Stacy had a question about peachwood. We'll make a note of that and we can discuss a little bit more at the Q&A portion. All right. And then our last part are toy fasteners. Here we have these pear-shaped quick links. Down here we also have some wide jaw quick links. I will say I do prefer using wide jaw quick links to hang up my toys, just because the wide jaw fits over cage bars a little bit easier than some of these, especially if you have a powder coated cage. Sometimes these won't fit on the bars and they can kind of scrape up some of that powder coating on your cage. And so using something a little bit bigger can be helpful for keeping your cage from getting any scratches in the powder coating and then rusting and things like that. We do want to make sure that we are using bird safe metals here, and that we're completely fastening them so they're not open and then we're getting beaks caught, things like that. So we do want to avoid any heavy metals when we're looking at hardware. So lead, zinc, copper are all toxic to birds, but it's really easy to find these in stainless steel or the nickel plated. And so I would just double check that before you purchase any of your hardware. One question that we get is birds that can undo quick links. And one thing that we have found has been really helpful, we had like a whole section of cockatoos and they could all drop their toys and they would drop to the bottom of the cage and then get pooped on, and it was so frustrating. But one thing that we have found that really works with these birds is using the skewers and putting this ball end of the skewer on the outside of the cage to keep them from undoing it. And I see her in the chat, keeping those quick link fasteners on the outside of the cage. That also works, especially if you have a play top cage. Sometimes those play tops will have like little food holders at the top. And I've seen people hang up the toy from the food holder on the outside so that the birds are not being able to undo them from the inside. So just an idea there if you have a very smart bird that is consistently dropping their toys and driving you crazy. So now that we have talked about so many different toy ideas, we're going to be diving into all of those safety things. So I will pass it over to Anna.
All right, so there's a lot to discuss when it comes to providing safe enrichment to our birds. Of course, we want it to be fun and colorful and have a variety of materials and everything we've just discussed, but safety really needs to be top priority here. So, first and foremost, just a little safety 101 and particularly materials to watch out for. Anything that has loose beads that if you notice a toy that has beads included or other small parts that could be ingested have popped off as your bird has played with that toy, make sure that those loose parts are collected and removed from your bird's cage so that they can't accidentally ingest those materials. And we've touched on fabrics a couple times here. We do prefer using fleece because that won't have loose threads. You can get non-pilling fleece, which really won't have small particles breaking off for your bird to ingest. But if you have cotton perching, for example, and you see any loose threads coming out of that perch from use, then making sure that we're snipping those loose threads. Or if your bird is really going after that cotton rope, maybe switching to a sisal would be safer for your bird if it's a repetitive issue. And of course, if there are any long pieces of untied string or any long fabric strips that your bird could get tangled in, that is something that we want to minimize their access to at all costs. Any other parts that your bird could catch a nail or a beak in and become stuck, such as if there are bells that have those little holes. We'll look at some examples of those jingle bells. Well, we have some right here. And anything that has those kind of little tiny clappers, if that's not an appropriate sized bell for your bird, these are things to consider as well. And there are other plastic parts that could have areas your bird could get caught into. And really a lot of different materials around our households could be utilized as like a foot toy or something along those lines. We use toothbrushes, obviously unused toothbrushes as an example of something that some of our birds like to hold and like wave around, but that isn't something that we would want to offer unsupervised, because in some different household items and unique novel objects we might want to offer our birds, if deconstructed, which our birds love to deconstruct things, you never know what might be lurking within in parts that you can't see. So for example, with those toothbrushes, some can contain dangerous metal anchors inside that might have those heavy metals we do not want them having access to. So just being really mindful about how things are constructed that we are giving our birds to play with. And in that same vein, some toys made for human babies can be used for foot toys and different things for birds. Just again, keeping in mind if there are any small parts that could be snapped off and ingested, or if there are components of that we don't want our bird to be accessing, always being present to be sure that that is not occurring and that we can remove that item if it becomes hazardous to our bird with how they are engaging with it. Next. And of course, when we're thinking about safety, where we are getting toys from is top of mind, because if we're using trusted manufacturers, we can feel a lot more at ease purchasing toys or toy parts online or in person for that matter. So one thing to watch out for is just how transparent a website is about the materials that they're using, the dimensions of those toys. I think we've all seen on Amazon a macaw photoshopped into a canary cage. So are they being truthful in how they are presenting the product? And what they're using for their dyes and their metals. So if that information is not shared either someplace on that website or in that specific product description, I would be really wary. I wouldn't really want to expose my birds to that. So Some general ways you can approach this, just avoiding sites that don't have your bird's safety in mind, like Temu, Amazon, eBay, or sites that are based in China. You can sometimes see posts that have pictures of 3 or 4 toys and it's for $10 for everything. That's a red flag. Of course, we can make toys and make that a little more economical, but if you're getting 5 or 6 or a perch and 3 toys for really, really cheap, I would wonder why. And then sometimes on eBay or Facebook Marketplace, you might see people trying to sell secondhand toys. And we really discourage, for people that you don't know and birds that you don't know if they're vetted or not, or if they could be carrying disease, just don't go there, even if those toys are for a great price. Now, if you have a friend and you know that their birds are fully vetted and you are not concerned about spread of disease from their birds, and they're like, hey, I really like this toy, do you want it for yours? That's not as big of a concern, but particularly if we have anything from someone you do not know, just don't go there. And then if you do get any toys from Petco or PetSmart or even Etsy, there are some artisan bird toys that you can purchase on there. Just really looking at those toys before you offer them to your birds, if it's not from a brand that is really meant to make toys for birds. If they really just aren't specialized in that area, be very cautious. On to the next. So of course, we don't want to just offer all of the cautionary tales and not give options for safe places to find toys. So these are all different websites that we feel comfortable sourcing toys from, and toy parts as well from. My personal favorite is probably abirdtoy.com, just because they have so much variety in toys and the different parts as well. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for me, for my birds. But lots and lots of variety in all of these different sites that you can hop from site to site, and you can start to note what certain toy styles or materials your bird prefers. And there's so much out there that is really safe, and we can be comfortable and confident purchasing toys from them. But along with that, always keeping that kind of sharp eye for if something is slipped through the cracks on their end and maybe there's a part that you wouldn't feel comfortable offering your birds. Still having that critical eye is really important, but lots of options for where you can go. All right, next. So of course we've touched on color and ink already a little bit in this presentation, but let's dive into that more. While of course we want to make our birds' lives really colorful and engaging, and having color in their toys is really enriching, we want to make sure that we're doing that in a safe way. So one really big one that we see on like cheap toys for sale online are painted elements. You really want to avoid that. So 2 examples at the top here, both have those painted beads where we don't want our birds to be chewing on those beads and that paint flaking off into their mouths and potentially being ingested. We really don't want that happening. And so below we have some colorful options that we could swap to. Colorful painted options above. So we have a wonderful balsa dyed toy that we know they use food grade colors. And then on the right, we have that little balsa swing instead of the colorful painted bead swing. So there's still a little bit of color in that balsa swing as well. And they can safely chew on that soft balsa and enjoy themselves. So dyes that you want to avoid are just those chemical dyes, and instead looking for food grade or veggie dyes. If there are any metallic or foiled finishes on something, we want to avoid that, as well as any glitter. So the glitter comes to mind in the foiled finishes when we look at paper plates or cups, as well as sometimes tissue paper can have the glitter. So just avoiding those altogether if we notice those are a part of a toy part. And then again, with the paper plates and cups, avoiding anything that's wax coated. Those tend to be a very colorful toy part, but we only want to do the ones that do not have the wax coating on them. And as Julie mentioned, most inks now are soy-based, which is safe for our birds to come in contact with. So when we talk about like boxes or newspapers, most of that is going to be completely safe. Although we do want to be mindful if a box has been used for chemicals or any other contaminants that you would not want your bird coming in contact with, or if it's been in kind of a icky spot in your home, let's maybe not offer that box to our birds. But if we have boxes that we are confident are nice and clean and have not contained anything concerning, that should be safe to offer. Next. So on to some hazardous hardware. We might see some toys that have a couple little elements that are hazardous that are easy to replace, but sometimes the hardware can really render a toy just unusable, which is super disappointing if you receive a toy. It happened to me once where I purchased a ladder toy for one of my birds, and it arrived and I had totally missed that it was completely constructed using screws, and he's a little, so that would not be safe for him to access at all. So watching for parts that can either pinch our birds or of course be very sharp and pointy and poke them are things to watch out for. So some examples are the snap carabiners or snap hooks that you might see on a dog leash, key rings, or the J hooks that have that kind of pinchy area where they secure. And then for our pokey elements that we see most often are going to be just screws or those eyelet screws. Sometimes that's unavoidable, like of course in perching, often there's going to be a screw in there to hold it all together. But if your bird isn't chewing on that perch to access the screw, that would be a very minimal risk. But knowing your bird, again, and making sure that they're not going to be taking away to the point where you're really concerned they're accessing that screw part is important, just for looking at them as a case of one. And Kyra mentioned earlier, but again, some unsafe metals that we want to avoid are any of those heavy metals. So chrome or zinc, those can kind of go hand in hand, copper and brass, and of course lead. So that is going to be something we keep in mind for our hardware and typically stick to that stainless steel. Next. All right. So of course, cleanliness is another aspect that can render a perfectly safe toy unsafe for our bird. So things that we can keep in mind is if there's a toy or cage furniture, by that I mean different perching and swings and all of that good stuff. We want to keep them all clean and safety inspected, which is something that you can really check whenever you're interacting with your bird near their cage, or if you are changing their papers, for example. And again, birds can really take safe items and make them unsafe at times. So continuing to check on these toys and perches that they are still safe as our bird uses them and enjoys them is very important. Of course, our birds use their mouths to interact with their environments and their toys. So making sure that they're not ingesting feces or even mold from dirty items is very important. Most items can be cleaned by scrubbing them down with some simple soap and water and then rinsing and letting them dry. Paper goods, of course, are a little trickier. We can't just scrub that down and depend on that being nice and clean. So for one, they might just need to be replaced more often, and it's a material, so that's one thing you can just keep up with. But also making sure that if our birds are taking baths or having a wash day where you're hosing down their cage or something like that, that will be something we want to be mindful of those paper goods not sitting and staying wet and becoming moldy, because then our birds could interact with that and ingest and inhale that mold, and that can lead to way bigger problems, of course. And so you might consider removing paper heavy toys during those times of day that you know you're going to be getting the cage environment wet. Or if your bird is pretty dependable about taking a bath when you vacuum, things like that, where you know this is probably going to get wet right now, let's remove it. And then you can put it right back in when you think it's appropriate. And if we have any soft fleece toys, or occasionally launder those, or just spot clean them to remove any grime. Shake them out if they get dusty with our grays and our cockatoos, just to make sure that's not building up. And checking that all of our perches are nice and secure. We would hate to come into our bird's room in the morning and their favorite sleep perch fell down, just because over time those perches can kind of spin as they're being used and become loose. So as you're cleaning, just give a little tug to all of your bird's perching to make sure everything is situated how it should be. And make sure with any cotton perching that those loose threads are getting snipped. And if there are certain locations on perching that are repeatedly pooped upon, consider scooching things around a little, that we can clear that poop zone and the poops can land in the papers rather than right on our favorite perch over and over again. Next. So now we're going to look at some dangerous toys and what we could maybe replace them with if that's a style or a specific toy that your bird really enjoys. So on the left, and we're going to use chat again here, just to throw out some things that you notice are not safe about this toy on the left. What do we think? Yes. So there are these long, skinny strings that they could get totally tangled in. It just makes me cringe. There are potentially painted elements here. Those bells, I'm not sure. It does not clarify how they are made to be colorful, as with those beads. We have unknown metals, exactly. On the description, I know you can't see the description, but the item description clarifies that the chimes in the middle are stainless steel, but doesn't clarify anything for the bells or anything for that skinny chain. So yeah, very good. So replacement option that comes in lots of different sizes is this stainless steel measuring spoon toy that still has fun color and these nice colorful plastic toy parts at the top, but it still would offer that nice jingling sound and the reflective elements. So a lot that really is fun in the first toy, but made safe in the second. All right, on to the next. All right, again in chat, what is wrong? They're on the left. Like so much. It's pretty amazing, actually. Yes, I'll echo crystals from the last one. Again, unknown metals. We have the key rings that a head could get caught in of a small bird, and it has pinch potential. We have all the little holes in those jingle bells that we could get a nail or a beak stuck in. We have lots of unsafe hardware here, so we don't know what metals they are made of. These links to me don't look super welded. Not a typical chain that we would use here. They have the J hooks that it's hanging from. It also has the snappy clasps get caught in. Yeah, so much no. And yeah, the paint and dyes on those bells, I wouldn't trust either. So much wrong with that toy. And a great option instead are these nice colorful pipe bells that are powder coated. So these guys are still going to have that fun color, and using this larger chain, you could even, if you liked the dangliness of the left, you could add in using some hemp or sisal rope, just string that through those big chain links and thread some toy parts on there so that they still have a little more fun stuff to interact with, but still get that fun jingly bell in the middle. Both of my birds love the pipe bell style, and that's a nice style too because the clapper is receded up inside so they can't access it as bird they are, and they are offered in many different sizes. So a really nice safe bell option are going to be the pipe bells. All right, on to the next. So this one comes with a little asterisk. If we have a bird in our home who we have observed for many years and they do not chew on our fabric elements that we offer, there is a world in which this snuggle hut might be safe for them. I would just really proceed with caution if your bird likes to rub on that fabric. I have a Kayik at home who really likes to surf. So I would worry about these really fuzzy particles being ingested if I were to get him this snuggle hut. However, we do have clients with birds who really aren't interested in chewing on fabric elements and greatly enjoy their fuzzy snuggle huts. So with fabric elements, I would really proceed with caution. And a really nice, safer alternative will be our kind of no-pill fleece snuggles over here. Someone mentioned in chat, yes, that for some birds that could, the little cavern of the one on the left might be kind of like a cave that mimics a nesting cavity in the wild, and that could promote nesting behavior. However, there are a lot of birds in this world who don't go into nesting behaviors because of a snuggle hut. So another really important thing to keep in mind, and another reason these kind of fleece snugglers on the right may not cause those reproductive behaviors to start because they're not going into a big cavern. So lots and lots of fun ways that we can still have something kind of nice for them to snuggle up to at night, but we can minimize that risk if we're concerned about that inhalation or ingestion of the fabric particles. And yes, Jonah did comment that they can also get icky very quick. So as I mentioned earlier, either softly laundering those materials that are soft fabric materials or spot cleaning them if possible can be really helpful to keep them clean.
We also want to suggest that if you have rope or cotton perches, you can certainly clean them in the same manner about cleaning the wood browse and the pine cones. Letting them dry appropriately is most important. But one of the things that works really great for cotton, fleece, and other rope materials is to put them in the top pull-out tray of your dishwasher and run your dishwasher not using soap, but run it with very, very nice hot water, and it'll clean those things right up.
Excellent tip. Wonderful. All right, on to the next one. And one more, what's wrong with this picture on the left, if you can throw that into chat. Again, a lot. A couple aspects of that perch that, yes, the strings, they're really long strings that they've left on this particular rope perch that they could absolutely get tangled up in. There's a J hook at the top that is inappropriate. They also do not give any information about what metals are used for the kind of wire core of this buoying, nor the hardware or bell. Yeah, this also, they do not clarify if this is a natural cotton rope or a synthetic cotton rope. So would be of more concern, even more concern, if it's a synthetic cotton rope, if they were to ingest any of that. So something that you could try instead is a natural sisal rope buoying. So there's an example of one from Bonka. They're transparent about what metal is used. It's all stainless steel. Depending on the size of your bird and how they interact with the bells, That could be an unsafe bell type for your bird. If your bird really doesn't mess with their bells, it could be fine. But again, really taking into account your individual bird's size and behavior when approaching bells is extremely important. All right, on to the next. Excellent. So of course, we've touched on it throughout, but to really focus in on how your bird is behaving with their enrichment is going to be another way to ensure that what you're providing is safe for your individual bird. Because sometimes if a toy is technically safe, it isn't necessarily safe for your bird. So one example I really wanted to give of birds sustaining injury through hard play is in this top photo on the left. We see Starbuck with the kind of umbrella style toy. Oops. So for Starbuck, this is a perfectly safe toy. He interacts with it very appropriately, plays with it, and chews up those wood elements. One of my birds at home, this is an entirely unsafe toy because he has caused himself injuries in the past from playing so hard with this toy. There's something about it that really gets him going, and he actually damaged some of his flight feathers from playing with it long ago. So that is a toy that is entirely unsafe for my bird. But some more examples of ways birds can injure themselves in hard play would be snapping chains that are too skinny for them, or other metal elements like bells. Those style of bells, you can kind of snap the clapper portion off from the main bell portion. So if your bird is really hard on bells, swap to the pipe bell instead. And then large birds can actually snap materials like lucite and acrylic and create really big shards of those materials that could be extremely dangerous. So taking that into account as well if you have a large macaw or cockatoo. And then of course, nesting behaviors, which someone had brought into the chat when we looked at the snuggle hut. So if your bird is engaging with an enrichment item in a sexual way, that might be something you want to remove. So we see this beautiful Timna African gray who has started to nest build in this box. A lot of birds can really enjoy having a box in the bottom of their cage to play in and rip up, and you can hide foraging items in there. But for some birds, it'll always trigger that nesting behavior. And in order to really make sure that we're not encouraging those sexual behaviors that can lead to medical consequences, we should be mindful of if that is something that's appropriate for our individual bird or not. Birds can also take to certain toys and have dates with them. Of course, that's a fun way to say they're masturbating on them. Or they can start to regurgitate on reflective surfaces. So some of those materials that really get them going in that way might need to be removed either for a little while or completely if it really triggers those behaviors throughout the year. And then again, we can watch our birds throughout the year and their behavior may change with those hormone seasons. So we can be mindful when we notice some of those reproductive behaviors tipping up and act in advance. Just don't offer that box if your bird has been kind of regurgitating at you lately or things like that. All right, on to the next.
I'd like to just briefly address this. One of the questions that came in from Carol is about, is it appropriate or not, in the slide that we just had, when you've got a bird that makes a date out of their toy or masturbates on it, is that appropriate to offer to your bird? We find that providing that kind of toy really doesn't do the bird any favor. It just continues to produce frustration. It may lead to an increase in hormones. Better to modify and change around the interior of your bird's cage frequently, once a week, once every few days, move perches, move feeding dishes, so that he's always got to look and find something else. And this isn't limited to just our male birds. This can happen with very nesty broody birds as well. We see that with budgies, cockatiels, lovebirds, and oftentimes female eckies. And I'm sure many of you on this webinar today are familiar with prolapsing, especially prolapsing cockatoo parrots.
Yes. So now we're going to move into a portion where we apply some of this knowledge and look at some commonly asked questions and ways that we can think about applying these concepts we've discussed. So regarding the toy safety, the biggest thing that we want everyone to walk away from this portion of the presentation with is a realistic way to assess with their individual birds whether a new toy or item is safe. So before offering an item, when we're examining that toy, some questions you can ask yourself are, did I purchase this toy from a trusted source? Is this toy made of safe materials and hardware? Of course. Are the materials appropriate for my size of bird? Is the toy nice and clean? That can be something you ask yourself continually. And is there any risk of strangulation or injury due to the current state of the toy? So that, of course, is also continuing as the bird has access to that toy. And then as you observe your bird with those items, is your bird playing appropriately with that toy? Is your bird consuming any elements of that toy? And finally, is the toy exacerbating any sexual or other problem behaviors in your bird? So really looking at your bird as a N of one, a case of one, is going to be a good path to safety in addition to checking for the technical safety of an item.
Well, keeping in the theme of answering some common questions and comments related to toys and enrichment, moving a little bit away from safety, but one thing that we see really common for people to ask us is, I have small birds, I have finches, canaries, doves, pigeons, things like that. Do they need toys? And the answer is yes, absolutely. Our small birds need enrichment for all of the same reasons that any other bird would need enrichment. So any small birds like those parakeets and non-parrot doves or non-parrot birds like doves, canaries, and finches, all should have adequate enrichment in their cages or environments. So going back to thinking about some of those natural behaviors, we want to look and make sure that we're providing them with opportunities to display those behaviors. So we can kind of think about some of these species. What are they doing? They're going to be engaging a lot with more softer materials. So doing a lot of shredding, maybe picking up little twigs, leaves, seeds, things like that. So then what kind of materials could we use for these guys? Papers, cardboards. We could offer card toys or toys with some of that crinkle paper. This is a really good time for us to utilize some of our browse. So I often see people using branches with foliage in their cages for some of their small birds. What else could they be doing in the wild? They're foraging for seeds. We could try sprinkling seed in and around their toys to encourage some of those foraging behaviors. We have a pair of budgies. Oh, they're actually being adopted today, aren't they? Or they were adopted today.
But yeah.
Oh, dang it. They will be adopted sometime soon. And these guys absolutely love interacting with this like little basketball and hoop that they have. A few things. It's like the perfect size for them. They love jingling around the little ball. Juliet will actually put the ball into the hoop. It's really colorful. It's different. They interact with it appropriately. It's safe for them. And so part of them engaging with that toy is the incentive is that they are having fun with this little ball. It's jingling. They play together, and interacting with this toy is enriching and engaging just on its own, reinforcing on its own. So Yes, we absolutely do want our small birds to be playing with their toys. And I think sometime in the future, we'll be having a webinar specifically talking about small bird enrichment and small bird care as a whole. So that'll be a really good opportunity for us to really dive in to working with our small kiddos. Let's see. I would say this is one of the most common questions that we get or comments is my bird doesn't play with their toys. And the question that goes along with this is how can I get my bird to play with their toys? I put a Senegal on this slide because I have personal experience with my Senegal Cookie. He lived with my grandmother for a very long time, and I would say for close to 20 years, he really didn't have any enrichment in his cage. I would send toys to my grandmother and for them to go into his cage, and she'd say, he's too scared. He doesn't like it. So he didn't have toys in his cage for a really long time, and it was really sad. Cookie in recent years came to live with me, and he was honestly pretty fearful of toys just because they were foreign. And it took a really long time, several months even, to get him interested in toys. But once he absolutely loved them. And now he is one of my most destructive birds, and he engages with a really large variety of enrichment. And so some of the things that I considered when we were working towards Cookie playing with toys were size. Was I offering him toys that were an appropriate size for his species? He had some toys in his cage that were like really hard woods, and so he's not really going to play with those because they're a little bit too hard for his species. So it makes sense he's not engaging with them. Another thing, have I interacted with this toy with my bird? I feel like this was a really important step when we're working with a bird that is fearful. The simple act of just touching the toy or maybe crinkling it a little bit so it makes a sound and just showing your bird that is something safe. You can maybe put some nuts on it so that they have more incentive to go interact with it. Um, when we're doing these things, we want to make sure that we're reinforcing all of these little steps. So even if they're not interacting with the toy initially, we can use our small approximations to build towards our birds actually engaging with the toy, which is our goal at the end. So maybe the toy is so scary that it's not even in or on their cage. It's maybe next to their cage on a table. And then it moves a little bit closer. One day you see your bird looking at the toy. We can reinforce that. Another day they might be standing a little bit closer to the toy. We can reinforce that. Eventually you see them touch the toy. We're reinforcing that. And eventually we want our birds to be able to interact with them to the point where interacting with the toy is reinforcing on its own. So again, we need to keep in mind that this is something that can take a really long time. Shaping and changing the behavior is going to take a lot of patience and work on our end. I would say getting Cookie to play with toys in my household took about 6 months. And so it's just a really long process. And let's say we're doing all of these things and maybe we're not seeing the results we're expecting. Switch it up. Our birds have preferences. They like different things. And so we can try different materials, different colors, a different type of toy. Maybe your bird doesn't really like foraging boxes, but they like foot toys, or they might like their hanging toys. And so it's never a bad idea to switch it up. You can always go back to what you were doing or try something else. But it's really important for us to put in that time and effort so that our birds are able to engage with enrichment. Let's see. One question that we get a lot is how can I keep my bird from going through their toys too quickly? And there's kind of two ways we see this question asked. One in that people don't want their birds to make a big mess, and they may go through their toys really quickly, and people don't want to buy new toys to replace them, and it makes a big mess in their house. So when we're having this discussion, it's really important to remind ourselves that birds can be inherently destructive little animals. we've said it a lot during this presentation, but it is so important that our birds are engaging in those natural behaviors. When they're living in our homes, they're living in unnatural environments. And so providing them enrichment and them engaging and using their enrichment, destroying the enrichment, is so important for them. In the wild, our birds are pollinators. They are shredding things, they're chewing things, they're dropping things onto the ground. And our choice to keep birds in captivity is not only a choice, it's also a commitment. And we're committing to our birds displaying those natural behaviors, and we really want them to do that. So that's kind of one way we see this question approached. But the other way is that my birds go through their toys so quickly, like I can't keep up with them. And that's a totally different thing. So again, some of the questions we can ask ourselves is this toy an appropriate size for my bird? I'm really happy that everyone loves this picture because it took me a long time to make. But we see this with our cockatoos a lot. Like if we're giving them tiny little toys, we're giving them tiny little balsa toys, they're gonna go through that in 30 seconds. So for our big guys that are really destructive, we might want to give him like a big beefy toy with really hard materials, really complex materials, to keep them busy for a little bit longer. And also just having multiple toys for them to choose from. I like to have anywhere from like 4 to 5 toys in my bird's cage at any time, like in the cage physically. And that gives them more things to interact with, more things to do. And so if that bird only has one singular toy, they might only engage with that one toy and go through it really quickly. So making sure they have a lot of different things to engage with can kind of help with making sure they have enrichment consistently. Let's see. Our other question is, I don't have time to keep my birds' toys filled or to change them out. I think we all encounter this, all as working professionals. We all have really busy schedules. And of course, our birds are a really huge part of our lives, but we have other things going on as well. So I have a few things that I like to call my lazy mommy enrichment. And these are things that I use on days when I'm running late and maybe I don't have time to refresh my birds' toys completely. One thing that I use, I call the foraging noodle. And this is something that comes really in handy for me when my birds are at home for a little bit longer. This is something that might work better for larger birds. I have 2 macaws and their cages are right next to each other. But basically what I do is I take a giant pool noodle. It's one of like the thicker ones. I poke holes in the noodle and I put little pieces of food, little pieces of nut in the noodle. This is something that takes me maybe 5 minutes to do to completely fill up the noodle with different parts. But it keeps my birds busy for at least an hour. And I like it for a couple of reasons. One, they're searching for the nuts along the noodle. They're problem solving. They're looking for things. I place it vertically between their cages. So that means they have to climb to access the different areas on the noodle. Sometimes they have to be inside of their cage to get to it. Sometimes they're outside of the cage, behind, all around. So I like that they have to exercise to do this. I place the nuts at varying depths and they have to kind of dig through the noodle to really get at those reinforcements. And when I originally started doing this, my birds weren't super sure how they were supposed to interact with the noodle. They were kind of scared of it. Maybe it looked like a giant snake or something like that. But what I did was I sat with the noodle on my lap and I showed them putting all of the different pieces into the noodle. And then they were watching me do this and they were getting really anxious about it. And so then I really didn't have to teach them how to interact with it because they were so excited to get the nuts. They kind of just did so automatically. So now when they see the noodle coming out, they get really excited. They're eye-catching, they're making a bunch of different sounds. They get so riled up that I'm not even sure if it's about finding the nuts anymore. I think that they like just beating up the noodle. So this is something that I utilize on days when I'm really busy or I'm going to be gone a little bit longer and I don't have time to refresh their enrichment. And this is something really easy, like it's not very complicated. but it keeps them busy. And at the end of the day, like that is what we are going for. And so that's like my Wednesday enrichment that I do. Other days when I have a little bit more time, I have a toy trolley. I have all of my parts organized in there. I can roll out my trolley. I have all my supplies ready to go in my little workstation. And that's something that I do on the weekends when I have more time. And having the little toy trolley has made it so much easier because I have all of my stuff there, and it's kind of fun as well because my birds are there watching me. And so going forward, we're at the end of our presentation here, and we hope that everyone has maybe come away with something different or a new idea. And what we want everyone to do is just to set a realistic goal for yourself going forward from here. And I have a few examples as well. So let's say your goal is, I want my bird to try playing with a new toy. Then we can say, we'll take 5 minutes out of our day to play with that toy with your bird. Another example, I want to provide my bird with different enrichment. Then we could say, let's look at some toy ideas online, or even any of the toys that we've looked at today that were good examples. And you can try recreating that for your bird to play with. Let's see, my other one here. I want to provide my bird with more enrichment. We could try combining some of those categories of enrichment. So this could look like maybe we're watching some bird TV with our birds and they're foraging for a little snack with us on the couch, maybe in like a little foraging box or a foot toy. But there are really so many things that we can do to improve our birds' lives. And these are just a few examples. If anyone else has any examples that they would like to share for like a realistic goal, we'd love to see those in the chat just to give other attendees some ideas there. And yeah, we just hope that you're able to go forward and maybe just do something new and different with your enrichment and with your birds. So that was everything. We are at the end of today. We want to thank you guys so much for attending our first online webinar. We really hope that you enjoyed all of the information that we shared today. We will be sending out the recording, a link to the recording, and we will also be sending out a survey, just asking for some feedback about today's presentation. And we will be hopping now into our Q&A portion of the presentation with Julie. This will also be recorded, so if anyone did have to hop off, this will be available on YouTube for you to view. And of course, if you would like to support us going forward with our webinar series, there is a QR code here if you would like to make a donation. We would like to be doing these monthly from now on over different topics. And we'd like to make sure that these are free and accessible for everyone. So it would mean a lot to us if anyone wanted to make a donation towards our series. But I think that's all I had. Julie, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed seeing the questions and the information posted on the webinar chat today. It's been really helpful. And it would be really appreciated from every one of you if you complete our survey. We always want to do the best that we possibly can. And with all of the expertise from our viewers and everyone taking this webinar, we know that you've got great information to be able to share with us. Pictures are awesome too, so are videos. I do want to address one particular question that was posted just a little earlier about, I believe it was Crystal posted it about her Moluccan cockatoo, who is ingesting, Crystal reports that her Moluccan is ingesting seagrass as well as small slivers of her wooden blocks, as well as cardboard. And I think this is really important. We go back to your bird is a study of one. Whether your vet says yes, whether your vet says no, they're not there 24/7 like you are with your bird. And if you find, and you know for sure that bird is ingesting seagrass, that could certainly be problematic. It's a lot of fiber. If that bird gets that material down to its crop, a crop impaction could occur. It's a possibility, and that may or may not require a trip to the veterinarian. Watching how your bird responds and behaves after introducing a new toy or seeing something like this and questioning about whether your bird is actually ingesting or not is really good, and it helps us all hone our observational skills. Some birds love to take pieces of seagrass and other materials or cardboard and take them and break them down into little teensy crumbles. And they'll manipulate them with their upper and lower beak, their tongue. It feels really, really, really wonderful. We posted a picture a couple of weeks ago about a blue and gold macaw that for that particular macaw, foraging and playing with a little sprig of millet was the most wonderful thing, because it was so satisfying for him to play and to remove those tiny little millet seeds. Was he ingesting a lot? No, he wasn't at all. But it was really fun to take them apart and to play with it. And it could be that with seagrass or other papers like cardboard that your bird is doing that as well. If you're in a situation like this and you see that your bird is straining to poop or not pooping appropriately, take a picture of it, make a note of it, keep that diary so you have information to go on if you need to see your veterinarian. In regard to slivers of wood, we have seen birds ingest wood. Some as a young bird, not really knowing what it was, and that can really be problematic. It can cause death in a bird. The other times we've seen it are in situations, and we especially had two situations a couple of years apart where birds were actually, they had nothing to eat, and they went and ingested, slivered and ingested a lot of the branches that they were on and the white pine. Many of them died, and on necropsy we could see what was in the crop, some of the problems that happened with that. So if you're sure that that's what's happening, change out the type of wood. Absolutely change it out. And really, again, observe your birds. And I also want to clarify one other kind of a misnomer. When we talk about an avian veterinarian, there are really two ways of looking at it. Number one, that veterinarian is very familiar and works and treats and sees a lot of birds. So that is a veterinarian with a special interest in avian medicine. When we have a diplomated or board certified veterinarian, that veterinarian is diplomated in avian medicine or which other of the fields, zoologic medicine, reptile. And technically, that truly is the definition of an avian veterinarian. And like the world around us, we have people that are really good with their assessment and veterinary skills, and others that may just not be. But if you're not feeling listened to, then it is really important to think about who pays the price should something happen. And the bottom line is that it's going to be your bird. Upcoming later this summer, we're going to be having some Q&As with our vets. We're going to be talking about birds with heart disease. We're going to be talking about birds with senior and middle-aged bird problems and all of those things. But these observational behaviors and interactions that your bird is performing, so important for us to all pay attention. I do want to bring one thing up that broke all of our hearts a few weeks ago. We had a little Jende conure that was adopted out, and it had been with us for quite a while. It was a wonderful little bird, had a little hidey hut in its own cage here. Our staff, who's with the bird all the time, because it was housed in one of the offices, knew what that bird was playing and doing whatever with those fabric or material pieces. What happened, this bird was adopted, and one of the protocols for adopting a bird from the Gabriel Foundation is that we have follow-up reports. And in those follow-up reports, we also request photos, and we're really, really glad we did. When reported that her bird was not doing well, it was lethargic, it was sleepy, and she was worried she was going to lose it, she got that bird to us, and immediately we took it in for emergency veterinary care. That bird died as a result of ingesting felt material, felted fleece from one of those little hidey huts. And we knew that's what it was because the color on necropsy of that fabric was the exact same color of the item that was in that bird's environment. So observation, observation, observation. That is the very, very best thing that you can do. And if you're not being heard and you're a vet and you are in a discussion about who's right and who's not, take a few steps, think about, okay, let's remove this from the environment. Let's try other things. What can we do instead that you can participate by watching and that you hope and leads to keeping your bird safe? It's really, really, really important. I've got plenty of opinions and ideas to share. If anybody has a question for us, we'd love you to put it out. We've got Kyra and Anna monitoring the Q&A.
Yes, so I think
yes.
we'll start from the top of our Q&A just to kind of go through some of these that were put in the chat while we were presenting. So our first one was, how do you clean pine cones and make them safe? And also with that, were there certain types of pine cones that should be used?
And that is covered in that slide about cleaning and disinfecting pine cones, browse, and wood branches. And what we prefer when utilizing pine cones for our birds is that we use pine cones that are already opened up. The ones that still have their scales closed may be sappier, and cleaning those is certainly fine to use in crafts than in providing to your bird. So,
oh, go ahead, Julie.
No, go ahead, Kyra.
Yeah, we had all of that information on like disinfecting the pine cones here. Are there any species of pine cone or like pine cones from certain trees that need to be avoided there?
To the best of my knowledge, that mainly go around, they're pretty safe. We've had giant redwood pine cones, we've had sequoia pine cones, we've had lots of different pine cones. In my travels worldwide, I see a lot of birds, especially in the Caribbean, that feast on the pine nuts in the Caribbean pines and love them. So generally, it is not a problem. However, again, a bird is a study of one. And that's why we strongly recommend you use the mature pine cone that's fallen on the ground or wherever you happen to pick it up, and that those scales are open.
Let's see, one question we had was, we had some mats with different materials attached, but it has now become cage ornament. As my bird does not engage with it, how can I teach or encourage engagement? And I think that had come up a little bit before. We had discussed that a little bit later. But would you have any other advice or any other tips or ideas for getting people or getting people's birds to engage with different toys?
Yeah, I think repurposing them is a really, really great way to do it. Birdie bagels are perfect for these. Those cardboard safe painted round discs, and take those mats, roll them up, and stuff them into the tightest birdie bagel that you possibly can. Maybe you want to have some pieces of food around that. Maybe you want to have a few pieces of a piece of millet, something like that. Or you could also use that grass mat and poke a couple of sunflower seeds in there, a pine nut in there, a piece of walnut, so that bird goes down actually to where that mat is and has to stand on it and use its beak and manipulate all those treats outside of that mat. That's a really, really fun activity. It's as much fun for us to watch our birds doing it as it is setting up one of those saucers with different kinds of rock, nestling all the seeds and treats in there.
One of the questions that I did see in the chat was, my bird is not very food motivated. Would you have any advice for people that have those birds that are not as food motivated for engaging with their toys a little bit more?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that are really fun, oftentimes when someone comes over, they see that I have a collection of straws and lids and paper cups from Starbucks or another coffee provider. I get them, I keep them, I clean them up. And then what I do, I may put a cork or two in that cup. I will put the straw in the cup, put the plastic lid on top of the cup. And I have birds that absolutely love to go to the bottom of the cage, pick up that toy with the straw, swing it around, move it around, take off the lid and reveal the corks that are in there, or other items like wood buttons that you can buy at any craft store, big enough wood buttons, or even the old-fashioned kind of clothespins. Those can be so much fun. Stick those clothespins on different cage bars. Your bird's going to get really curious, I imagine, about pulling those off and biting them, and they're clean, they're nice, they're a great way to use.
And one of the other things I think of when I think of reinforcement is food is not the only type of reinforcement as well. And so if your bird is really reinforced by, let's say, like praise and attention, we see this a lot with the cockatoos, then just like the simple act of engaging with some of those things that look really fun, like a cup with a cork and all these different materials, like you engaging with that and giving them the attention and praise while you're doing that with them is reinforcing in its own. And so it is, again, like the study of one, you just have to look at
One of
what
the
is
things that
reinforcing for your bird. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, one of the great things that you, Anna, and our team do that is so reinforcing is dance parties. Our cockatoos, probably more than any other species, absolutely live for going to the prom. So there could be headbanging music, there could be ranchero music, there could be just really fun rock, whatever, orchestral. And when us humans start moving around and getting excited, that's pretty contagious to our birds. And we often post those pictures on our Facebook page, number one, because it makes us all laugh. And number two, our birds really get into it. So that can be a huge reinforcer, absolutely huge.
Love that. All right, let's see. We had a question about ensuring that paper products used in toys are clean and safely sanitized before use. We had talked about some of those safe paper products to use and then keeping them clean and safely sanitized, of removing them so they're not getting moldy or kind of gross. Did you have any other thoughts on that, Anna?
Oh, I would toss it over to Julie if she has any more specific things.
Well, and I think clean and sanitized, I think if we're buying cups or anything used for human consumption, the Chinette paper plates, the plain white paper plates, the white or undyed coffee filters, those are all safe. They're made for human consumption. I think that the way most birds interact with them, they're not ingesting it. They're smarter than we oftentimes give them credit to be. So I think that those are clean and they're newly used out of the box. Absolutely just fine. So are paper towel rolls. So are a lot of the toilet paper rolls. What we see, and I think that we have a fairly good database of birds to draw from, hundreds of birds over the years that play with these toys. And what do we see? What evidence is there that they're ingesting or getting ill from one of these kinds of materials? We haven't had that happen. About Amazon, I think any warehouse probably is going to treat their space, their area with rodenticides or pesticides, but they are also working with humans, and that if humans are working in those big warehouses, and there's the possibility of contamination or illness with a person, that generally those rodent kinds of toxins are generally those that are designed especially to kill rodents. And there are ways to safely dispose of them. And generally, those boxes are stored high enough up off the floor that hopefully mice or other rodents can't leap and jump on them. But when you have seen with a lot of paper stored, or you have boxes or cardboard stored, it is, and birds also can be an attractant for rodents because they drop and spill food. So I think talking with an environmental pesticide company or a pest control company, excuse me, about ways to treat mice, if you have them, is certainly worth a discussion. It's something we have to monitor and take care of all the time. We're on 35.5 acres, so there's a lot of open space. A lot of wild rodents live out there as well. And we basically have a fabulous buffet inside when our birds are eating and dropping food on the floor.
And then just going to take a small pause over here to one of the questions that we received in the chat about medication. We are not veterinarians, and so we're not able to answer any kind of questions regarding specific medical things. You should really be speaking to your veterinarian about any kind of medication administration and things like that. Julie, any comments there?
I agree.
Yeah, so I would just pass along that information to your veterinarian and just discuss some of your concerns there. But we are not able to offer any information about medication administration.
One of the things that we will be doing when we go in our behavior and training webinar, and you'll see on our Beyond the Bird Basics, a new and wonderful section on behavior. Shauna Roberts, who's a longtime board member of the Gabriel Foundation and a very talented nutritionist, as well as behavior and training person, has created some fabulous videos about training animals for medical procedures. She's doing that with some of her cats. She's had to do it with her dogs. And all of us, sooner or later, are probably going to have to learn to medicate our birds sometime. So there is a great way to learn to be able to do that, and we'll cover that. But that will be in a future webinar.
And then looking at some questions from Jennifer, I think these were when we were looking at the toys made by Cherish. Are these toys made by individuals or bought from a store and company? And all of the toy examples that we showed were made from one of our wonderful volunteers named Cherish, and she had donated some of these toys to our flock members. Oh, go ahead, Anna.
I will note a lot of the pre-made toy examples later in the presentation were also, and the toy parked pictures were pulled from abirdtoy.com, who gave us permission to use those photos, and was one of the sources that we recommended for getting toys and toy parts too.
Yes. Here. And then also a lot of the toys that Cherish had made were inspired by toys made from the Birdhouse bird toys. They are one of my absolute favorite toy makers ever. And so they have just a really, really great selection of some toys there. So, and then one of the other ones on there was what is Sola? Sola is just, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like a spongy wood.
It's
It's a
Oh,
tapioca plant root.
yeah.
tapioca plant root. Awesome.
And it belongs to the same family as poinsettias and castor oil. So
Interesting.
I would probably stay away from it.
Sola.
Yes.
Hmm.
There's a veterinarian and a biologist who many years ago came up with a safe wood list for birds, and her name is Jillian Willis. And why we were going through this presentation, and the question was asked about all the peach trees, and how's that wood? Is that safe for birds? If you're going to use any fruit wood, you obviously want to have it be safe, but that also includes whether or not that orchard uses pesticides or insecticides on the treatment of the wood in their orchard or on their farm. That's essentially crucial. But she also lists that peaches, nectarines, plums, those stone fruits all come from the prunus species of fruit tree, and that wood has been shown to be toxic. I do not know if we have any data on what exactly was found to be toxic. So I can't answer that question, but with such an abundance of other wood, absolutely, we have many choices and ways around it. I don't know if anybody could see on the webinar chat, if you scroll back up, I did post a really great resource for balsa wood. I had no idea that balsa wood and competitions involving balsa wood were such a big thing worldwide. And I went up to Loveland, Colorado, which is north of Boulder, on the way up to Fort Collins, to this fellow and his mom who have this amazing balsa wood warehouse. And it's called Specialized Balsa LLC, and he's in Loveland, Colorado, and he ships around the world. He's got dedicated bird people and those who enter all these balsa wood competitions. And going in that warehouse was just amazing because every piece of wood that he had in there had a reference number of it. And we were in a giant warehouse. It was clean, absolutely beautiful. The packaging of the wood is wonderful, and you can get in pieces. If you get the industrial grade, it just means it's just not quite as fancy a wood as the others. But in terms of our flock who love to destruct it, it is just great. It's a little on the pricey side, but when you see how well it's enjoyed by some birds, it's well worth the cost of enjoyment.
And a few other notes on some of those woods there. Shauna had sent us a resource on the stone fruit woods. And it said all of the trees that belong to the prunus species can contain cyanogenic glucosides, which release cyanide if ingested. And that's also why we say to be careful when feeding stone fruits, is the stone itself can contain small amounts of cyanide, which if ingested by our birds can be dangerous. And so that is why some of those sources say to avoid those prunus woods. And then I think the balsa resource that you had sent was only sent to post, so I will send that now to the rest of the chat.
Good, thanks, Kyra.
Wonderful. Other kind of browse related, should eucalyptus and floral arrangements be avoided, or is it safe?
There are a couple of ways in how it's used. I oftentimes will go on the internet and I like to buy a bottle brush and fresh eucalyptus branches and palm fronds and branches that are safe, that haven't had pesticides on them, and use them for my birds for foraging. And I think a lot of florists really like those same products to be able to utilize in their floral arrangements. When you see the kind of eucalyptus, that's the round little leaf on the stalk, and it's got a very fragrant smell, which all eucalyptus does, but it's got that waxy texture that has been preserved. So if you use eucalyptus that has come in floral bunches, you want to be sure that it is not that waxed, heavily artificially scented eucalyptus that's been given a big zap with eucalyptus oil. The other thing too is that floral arrangements are often put in preservative that the flower or the stalk of that flower absorb. And if you've got eucalyptus that has been in water that's had that flower freshener or flower life extender, I would stay away from it.
We had another question. This one was regarding cinnamon. And from my understanding, there's two types of cinnamon, and this person asked, the good type of cinnamon is the Ceylon cinnamon, is that correct?
Yeah, and this went around this has been going around for the past couple of years about that there's some kinds of cinnamon that have been contaminated, and that's generally been in the harvesting process, and then other in the grinding process. So I would stick with Ceylon cinnamon. We often use the bark from cinnamon sticks in our birds' foraging baskets. I often will put a piece in when I'm making mash for the birds. Birds can sort of shred it like toothpicks, and it works really, really nicely. A lot of the Mexican grocery stores sell a very thin grade of cinnamon, which is not the Ceylon variety. It's a very light, papery type of cinnamon. And something that's wonderful like that, if you happen to be in an area where you can find naturally growing eucalyptus wood, and you get to see all the bark shedding off off the eucalyptus branches, those are great to give to our birds to shred. They have a blast with that.
Let's see. And then we had one more question that was kind of like wood related. She said, where would you recommend buying safe pine or hardwood lumber for DIY toys? Recently gotten into woodworking, and then see a lot of conflicting information on Home Depot as a source for the safe kiln-dried and untreated wood.
Well, Lowe's, Home Depot, all your lumber companies, if they're getting kiln-dried white pine, it's all prepared pretty much the same way. I would guess that you want to shop at a place that moves their product frequently, so they're constantly replacing it. We have wood from a couple different lumber companies donated to us, and we cut it and utilize it, and it's worked out really well, and we stick with the kiln-dried white pine. I'm sure there are other specialty stores. Hobby Lobby may have some things like that, or Michael's may have something like that. But in my personal experience, and I'm a study of one, I have not had a problem with kiln-dried white pine from those sources.
Alrighty. So put this back. And then we have time for just a few more questions here. So I am just going to pick out a few. Let's see. Someone has read that bells can trigger hormonal behaviors. Your thoughts on this?
Well, if that bell is your bird's best friend, yes, it can. I have a little Timna that shares my life. His name is Bodie, and when that bell starts ringing, it's time to move it out of the cage.
I've also seen, like recently, we've had a lot of birds that have been regurgitating into reflective surfaces, which includes bells. That can also include like food bowls and things like that. So sometimes if you have a very vain bird that is looking at themselves in the reflection of their bell, that could be one of the things that is causing some of those hormonal behaviors. We've seen that a lot recently, so.
Yes.
Let's see. We had a question about dummy eggs and are they beneficial?
Yes, they are. And I think especially this time of year, this is just really a tough time of year for birds, and some just get triggered to go into this really hormonal stage. I recommend dummyeggs.com. The information that they provide on their pages is accurate. It's wonderful. It gives you information on the clutch and the hatch times, or the incubation times for eggs, how to use and substitute dummy eggs for the regular eggs. I think it's a really, really educational, beneficial website, and it would do everyone good to read that, especially if it's a female bird.
And then kind of in that similar vein, we had a question. I often see pigeon and dove keepers encouraging hormonal behaviors when those same bird people completely avoid it in parrots. I know you have some pigeon and doves that you adopt out. Would you discourage the date toys for pigeons and doves?
Well, you live with Charlie. What do you think about that?
Yes, this applies very directly to me because I have parrots and a pigeon. I have seen information online where, like, when we are physically interacting with our parrots, we stick to the head and the neck for appropriate touching. Even then, sometimes that can trigger hormonal behavior. So again, the study of one. And I do see some people say that touching below the neck for pigeons and doves is not erogenous area for that type of bird. I will say it definitely can be. And again, like if your specific bird is kind of being turned on erogenously by touch in that area, then you do want to avoid that. I will say, like right now, Charlie, my pigeon, is very nesty when it comes to her snuffle mat. She has like a foraging snuffle mat in the bottom of her cage. A few months ago, she had laid like 4 eggs. I had kept those there to see if it would keep her from laying more and she could just like sit on that clutch. But she was just laying as long as she had that snuffle mat. So I removed the snuffle mat and replaced it with other toys that she didn't have her date time with. And so I would say, like, best thing there for the pigeons and doves is removing those toys that they're hormonal with, and replacing them with other things that they don't engage with in the same way. So they still have the enrichment to interact with, but they're not exhibiting those hormonal behaviors. With her, it seems to be things that are laying flat, like a little nest. And so I've removed those kinds of toys from her enclosure and replaced them with things that hang up on the side. But yeah, definitely interesting there. Well, wonderful. Well, I think we're pretty much at the end of our Q&A portion. There were a few that we didn't get to answer, but if anyone had any remaining questions or anything that comes up afterwards, we will be sending out the link again so you can reference back to the presentation. And you're also welcome to email any outstanding questions that you have, or put them in the survey if you'd like, anything like that. So we'll be sending out those links probably tomorrow if I had to. Yes. But wonderful. Thank you everyone for attending. We had so much fun chatting with everyone and sharing all of this wonderful information. We're so happy that you're all able to join us, and just keep an eye coming up for our next webinars.
Thanks, everyone. We love your questions and your comments. And for those of you that have donated already, thank you so, so very much.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you again soon.
Bye.